Hello and welcome back. Thank you so much for joining in again. Today we are doing chapter 50, which is going to be a lot of fun. Last time, of course, was the fabled Battle of Nissa, which fucking no one's heard of, but was a really interesting thing to cover anyway. So today, chapter 50, we are doing 1064. Cheers. The ships arrived on the beach in the afternoon. Once more they, aboard, heard the scraping sounds as the keels rode up onto the sands, and their momentum was stopped. Fitbjorn stood on the prow of the lead ship, the Hafald, the Brynulf, and inspected the tureen he'd taken from the church from England. The bowl was of silver with some gold on the contours. There too were jewels of bright color, bound into the sides. It was beautiful and utterly unnecessary for a priest to have. Well, the priest didn't have it any more. All the rest of the wrecker and the shield maidens jumped from the ship's sides and left their lord to stand inspecting what he was inspecting. They all walked upon the shore with their weapons drawn, and aggression in their postures as they circled about and looked for anyone who'd contest their landing. It was all sheer boasting of character, as there was no one on this small island between the Scots land and Norway to fight. "Lord," called Lydia of Kattegat, "what do you say? Here?" Fitbjorn smiled. Of course here, he thought, but didn't say it like that. "This is good. Set a perimeter and protect our sides. And build me a damn cellar. I need a proper mead hall for tonight." "Aye, Lord," his warriors shouted together. There were numerous barrels aboard the ship of both mead and stolen ale from the brewing monks. Nothing they seemed to need in this life. They were awaiting the days of Ragnarok in the swamps of hell, for their deaths were not famous. The crew of his ship began their work, directed mainly by Ragnar, though they knew well what they were doing. They began to untie the ropes on the mast and the side railings. They lowered the crossbar and gathered up the sail carefully. Fitbjorn dropped from the ship's side and made for the hill atop the beach to oversee the work from there. "Lord," asked Orm, watching him walk past. "Here," he replied, throwing the bowl carelessly to him with a smile. "That will get you a good fortune in your hand." The tall and long-bearded Orm eyed the bowl hungrily. "Yes, Lord," he said with excitement in his voice. He reached the hilltop, a short rise, and looked out at the barren sandy land beyond. The sand was nearly black, and there were a few patches of green dotting the terrain between his beach and the farther hills. This would be a bad place to get stuck, he knew, but they'd only be here a night or two. They had food with them, easy one from English towns, and there would most likely be seal and seabird to hunt on the island. There would be no protection on this rock from a storm wind, though, and the gray sky and light rain seemed like it could turn to black and blustering without warning. "Anything else, Lord?" asked Gisle, coming to his side. "So much else," he thought. "I shall want a fire tonight. Something to ward off this chill. Organize 13 and go get me a flame." "Yes, Lord." "If there's any indication that we'll have enough for a full fire all night, then I want you to come back with the first armload and start the flame straight away. The wolf can do so much, but the god's magic will always be more." He pulled the fur of the gray wolf closer about him, feeling again the ice of the night he'd gone to get it, the cold wolf. He looked back and saw the mast lowering the ropes with great caution. Ragnar stood and observed the process, keeping those involved attentive with his order and command. Four stood at the back with ropes in hand and slowly lowered the mast down, while four men stood on the prow of each ship and received them as the spars were already being carried up the beach and the sail of the Brynulf followed it. The construction was a long held tradition and was carried out by a crew nearly as a sacred ritual. The masts of the ship were dug some into the sand and set upright so their tips were against each other in a large A shape. A hole was already bored through both to allow for the high pole to be fit through them. The spars were raised at the back in the same way, and all these were tied down with the ship's rigging. Once the extra spar kept on the ship in case the first was damaged was put into the borehole, the locked in place, it was time for the sails to be tied on. 3 ropes were thrown over the A-frame structure on both sides, and the sails of both ships were laid out in readiness. The ropes were tied to the ends and the middle of the sails, and together the canvas were pulled up one at a time over the center pole. When both the sails were up to cover as walls from wind and rain, they tied down everything to strong points on the frame or with stakes in the ground. When they were finished with that, they had a strongly built hall they could drink in, and the command would sleep in the night. The rest of the crew, though there would be few who could still fit into the salar under the canvas, would sleep comfortably on the beach under a leather tent, of which there were many more than needed. The most important part for sleeping on the beach was to have a barrier between oneself and the sand. Sand, particularly wet sand, would suck the heat straight out of a person. Those left outside the salar would have the fire to warm them too. Gisle and her team had found enough of the sparse wood and roots to make a small fire that they kept adding to. It always surprised them how much wood they could find in such a place as this. Gisle had in fact come across a small thicket of stubby trees that had hidden themselves from the sea gales and grew stout in the dark gray soil of the island. Just outside of the hall, the fire was tended and kept strong against the still falling rain that did nothing to threaten the flames. All outside knelt by the fire and put out their hands to warm themselves. Good, Fitbjorn said, observing the work. Now get to my chairs. The chairs were 2 pieces of wood that fit together, both the same length with a slot to slide the seat in through the back and make for a strong seat. There were 4 of these made. Fitzbjorn, Ragnar, Niels, and Skadhild all had a seat readied for them, and they each sat gratefully. Fitzbjorn heard the wood creak as he sat and remarked at how good it felt to take the weight off his feet. He knew he was getting older and older, and felt it most at the end of the day. He sighed contentedly in that moment and looked at his never-wearied crew, watching him, expectant. Good. Now crack open those barrels. Have the horns poured and girt these stout warriors each drink. The crews cheered in celebration and struck out the corks on the barrels the monks had brewed. It was a clear, bright ale they had made, and the raiders enjoyed much the taste of their work. Fitbjorn, Ragnar, Niels, and Skadhild each had their horns brought to them as they accepted them with gratitude, each pouring a sip for the gods, for fallen friends, for battles won and lost. They bloated for lives lived, lives taken, enemies slain, and friends kept. The whole of the mead hall all joined together in a great appreciative moment for all they had and reverent moment for everything they no longer had. Someone, Fitzbjorn said after drinking long and well from the horn, sing to me of hearth and home. Sing! I want the song. Durra then cleared her throat. She was a wolf within the crews, but even among them she was small. Her place was not only for her fighting, but she sang well, and all loved to hear it. Now they all quieted and sat on the sands in the salar, and those outside crowded in closer. There they came here unto me, unto me. I heard and saw the Vitar come to see my bright day fall. There the Aesir watched me go, watched me go, watched me go. Never shall I fail as they watch, never shall I fail. Now the Vitar know my spirit, test my spirit, hold my spirit. Hear my ancestors, know my fate, and watch me as I thrive. Here they came, here unto me, unto me. I saw them in their worlds, know their place as I seek warring, and all of them watch me, for all of them watch me. The crew knew the words, and many sang along, but hers was the strongest voice among them all. The song was somber, well sung, and powerful. As she sung, some were quiet and listened to the power of their voice together. Hail, said Fitbjörn as the song was done. Hail, they all repeated, and they drank to the wonderful song of Dura. Those around her patted her shoulder and bowed to touch her with their foreheads. She laughed and enjoyed the praise of her trusted allies. Now then, I need a story, and more song, and more meat. I need more. I will always need more. This last he'd spoken more quietly, and into his mead horn. This is much. 3 ships, 100 crew, many good and strong warriors of my own army. This is not enough. They laughed and cheered and pushed each other around as he spoke, excited for the praise and the mention. Speak to me a story. Niels, how is that arm? In pain, White Bear. It's always hurting these days. The cold makes it ache. You knew that would be the case when you cut that sword with your bone. Tell us that story, shouted a warrior from Svitjod. I would love to hear of when the song speaker was injured. A strange thing to say. I want to hear of the White Bear's axe, said Aela. The Scot, apparently. Oh, yes. Tell that one. I heard it a year past and wish it again, Gisle said. She'd snuck up beside Ragnar and leaned against him. Fitbjörn cleared his throat. When I want story, I didn't mean that it would be me telling them, he said, with feigned exasperation. The crew laughed. Too late now, laddie. You've been called and the laird needs to share. If he's to continue being laird. He sighed again. I was a boy once. You were what? Shouted Ausmund, and all laughed heartily. Even Fitbjörn. Weird to think, but I was. My father and I were hunting in the far north, out on the ice. We had a small boat for the both of us, and we rowed between the ice when we could, dragged it over the ice when we couldn't. For 3 days, we had been eating the seal that we had killed with my father's bow. That was a good kill, and good meat. He promised he would make me gloves from the skin when we were home. He smiled sadly. I never got those gloves. It was night or day. It was winter, and the sun had only an hour in the world for us. The light we navigated by was the dancing lights of the gods in the sky, all pale green and blue. A thin veil between the cold white ice below and the cold white of the stars above. We hunted, never knowing that we too were being hunted, but knew something was near when we found the carcass of a seal that had been scattered about. The blood and viscera were strewn upon the snows, but whatever had killed it had been careful to leave no tracks of its own there. Then we saw it. It has been 30 or more years since that day, and I will never forget the unbelief of that fear. I watched a part of the snow rise from the ice and tower over us. I was stopped in curious surprise as the great white presence stood there. But then it dropped on to all force and moved for us. My father was fast. He pushed me out of the path of the sleek, powerful Bjorn and aimed his spear at it. Even so young, I remember the presence of the warrior Hugur in me. Thrown as I was and I turned and ready to strike. The great white Bjorn howled past my father. His spear struck not the creature, but only glanced the side off of his great shoulder. Its impossible shoulder. The hulking monster turned afterwards, nothing showing of pain or anything like that, but the fury that the set will to eat us both. When next it ran for us, I managed to stab success with my spear and caught it in the neck as I ducked to the sides. This made it angrier than I knew a beast could grow, and it rounded on me. I knew I was dead. I felt that I was dead. There is nothing in the whole world like the feeling, the knowing you are dead. I will never forget that feeling. I'm sure some here have felt it many times. The blade and the end of that spear broke away as I lay there. The Bjorn's neck turned to me, and I knew it would crush me with those big paws. Then there was my father. He slammed into the towering beast and plunged his spear head deep. Still, it did not fall. Only when he pulled free the haft and the second spear was lodged did the great creature fall, and it nearly shattered down the ice with its fall. I felt the thump as it struck near me, and will forever hear that sound in my dreams. I lay there, unable to really believe that we had succeeded. This may as well have been a Jotnar, we felt, a primordial monster that is as much a part of the tree as a mountain. But my father was overcome with the sensation of protection and had to fight it, and he had to fight for me. I do not know how long I lay there in my terror, but when I regained some sense, there I saw my father butchering the animal. He had no wood to burn for a fire, and had been keeping warm with an ox skin tent in the darkest parts of the night. But there was no rest to be had that night. Together we cut down the middle of the bear and sliced out as much of the meat as we could take. We, with great precision, cut away the skin to make this fine cloak. He stood and swirled his cloak about him lavishly as the others cheered. And we took the spears and the bone to have them forged together. The haft of the spear we took with us, for this was no ordinary wood. The spear's handles was cut from the wood of the world tree Yggdrasil itself. That is why the rest of it held strong as the spearhead broke off. And those spearheads were used to make my axe, which I fought with for many years. What happened to this fabled axe? Asked Sigurd. Fitzbjorn sighed. It was taken from me, by a friend, in a moment of great need, the greatest need I have ever known. I saw him become a hero with that axe in his hands. His name was Harold. He felled many men with that weapon. He paused then and took another drink. What happened to him? Fitzbjorn looked up to meet the gaze of the warrior who'd asked, and saw each of them were asking with their eyes. He was killed. Too many enemies were around for too long. He fought brilliantly, but then there were too many behind him, and the warrior of the king took the axe. Why didn't you go get it? I was too far. I was being pulled away. I would have died that day if I hadn't been saved by my friends. That day I found the wolf's skin. That day I changed. There have been many days that I have found I was forced to change. He looked around at the somberness his tale had wrought. But I tire of speaking about myself. Come, another story. Someone tell me a tale of a monster. I want to hear of a thunderer besting many Jotnar, or the Allfather spotting everyone in the lands. I have a tale of a monster, Niels said. Oh, I've heard this one, Varg said. It's good, though it can't be true. Shut up! This happened. Some saw it, Niels replied proudly. It is the time I saw a sea monster, a great whale, a horrifying being from the depth, brought to our world from Niflheim. We were sailing from somewhere in the North Sea, or the Baltic, or on our way to raid, or home from a raid, or were we at war? It was the Bodils feasting, I remember, and there was other ships with us out upon the waters. Niels had stood and was now walking about, gesticulating his story as he was oft to do with his hands. The hugger aboard the ship was high, the spirits well tended, as if we had been drinking already on the god's drink. But our happiness was too short-lived, as it usually is found to be. For there, out onto those waters rose a dense fog from the deep, and altogether our moods sunk to that place with the sight of the mists. None of our peoples, none indeed of any peoples who sail the seas, embraces the mists with love. What things might the fog hide? What stone in the grey sea or cliff wall might we be battered against, for we did not see it? It was I who stood at the prow of the ship, looking down into the churning water and expecting a stone to appear to breach our hull at any instant. I held firm the wood of the dragon's head finger with my left hand and stretched my left hand to the water, just waiting for doom to befall us. It was the worst place for us to be. We knew there were dangers about, but did not know where. And then I saw something impossible, precisely what I had feared most in this realm. There out of the water rose a stone. A rock surfaced before my very eyes and rested by the edge of the boat for some time. Of course, you here all know what it was. The thick grey skin of a whale that had come up and swam aside us now. I breathed mightily. It breathed mightily from its back, as these beasts do, and sprayed into the air. I was stunned and covered in the rain it made, and thought it must go back away from where we sailed. But as I looked back down, I saw that it still floated there. I know not what possessed me. Perhaps it was the strength of my hamminga. Maybe the whale is my filja. Who can say? But I jumped down from the railing there and landed on the body of a monster. I had to go some distance and immediately knew I was dead. I knew I'd fall into this chill sea and drown there. But what happened next? What next I saw was among the most amazing things that could ever be. There in front of where I stood, another of the great beasts came from the depths and breathed out another waft of spray coming toward me. Now, I know a sign from the gods. When I see, it is clear, and I took a step to run to the next one. Then I ran along the body of that one, realizing instantly that it was only making a temporary exit of the water. I made to the end and accepted that I would plunge into the ocean there after my flight. I was ready to accept death. If this was my end, then the Norns had spun a great fate for me. The tail gets narrow, near the back, you see, and I was struggling to keep my balance on it. Then I came to the end, where there are those two great fans that spread out to the either side. Here I stepped my last on the whale with my right foot and launched as the fin lifted lastly above the water, and I soared. I flew through the air with such speed that I thought I might skip across the water when I came to it. But the gods are tricky in their weird wisdoms. There, in front of me, as I leapt, out of the mist before me, appeared another of our ships. At first, I thought it was the Valkyrie choosing to sail to Midgard, a ship to Midgard to take me up to Valhall for my feet. Then I thought I should never be able to make it to the ship's railing, but the gods are tricky. It was, of course, another of our ships, and I just barely managed to land on the deck there, to the utter bewilderment of the men who sailed it. So astonished were they that they looked down and beyond, unable to see where I had come from in for the mists. They asked me how I got there. He paused now, reveling in the attention once more and loving the laughter they were all sharing in. And do you know what I told them? I said that I flew. He ended the story with a flourish and sat back down by Fitbjorn, who patted him on the shoulder. He too was laughing now. There is no way that happened. Such a fine story, and quite the feat to boast of. Well, runner, I swear it is true, Niels said defensively. Oh, do you? Asked Orm. Swear upon your right arm ring, then. Many looked to Niels with curiosity. It is not well to swear on the ring for something like this, Fitbjorn said. That is for sacred oaths. And yet I do swear. I swear upon this sacred arm ring that my story is all true. Every word spoken. They all clapped and cheered at the show. Fitbjorn sat in his place, watching the crews all gathering together and laughing together. Ragnar and Niels sat at his side, and in the crowd he felt, not for the first time, that he could sense the eyes of Bodil, Hafvald, and Inga. He remembered. He remembered many of the nights they'd all sat around a fire together, joking and telling stories of home. Bodil always having something to eat and drink handy to share. Hafvald drinking too much and Inga scolding him with a hidden laugh. Niels would be telling a story and Ragnar would be sitting in the silent judgment of all these heathens. all enjoying themselves, even Fitzbjorn. He had been so quiet back then. Not that he had changed much, he realized, but he spoke more easily now. You know, friends, he said with only enough volume that Niels and the Ragnar knew it was they he spoke to. I think I have truly enjoyed this life. Hard as it has been, cold as it has been, and hot, Ragnar said. And hot, Niels repeated with a laugh. Yes, all of it. I am glad I was able to share it with you both. Oh, the white bear's has gone drunk, Ragnar said with a shake of his head. Maybe I am, I think. He looked again at his people, all talking with each other joyfully. I think spending my life like this is exactly what I have always wanted to do, and I'm glad to have done it with you. I miss them. Aye, laddie. I miss her too. I miss them too. Here, then, to the best of friends who are most fortunate of all, that they watch our miserable evening in the rain from the High One's table in Valhall. Ragnar laughed at the blasphemy. May they never realize they're actually in heaven with the one true God. I thought you said you have to ask some dead man for forgiveness in order to get to that place. Niels jibed. For the lassie and the lovers, I'd make an exception. You both are damned for certain, though. They all laughed together and raised their horns, pouring out a generous sip for their friends. Then they drank and told story and sang and laughed and loved. The night spent on the beach was like many they'd had, and they each appreciated the utter beauty of something so simple. End of chapter 50. So, this one, yeah. What I really wanted to get across with this one, in addition to the expressing how far Fitzbjorn has come along with his ability to tell a story, was also the make of the salar, the mead hall, and the way that the Vikings would actually take the parts of their ship and build it into a hull like that, a big A-frame, such and so. That's all apparently completely accurate and happened exactly that way with the sails and the masts and everything. When I read that, I loved it so much that I absolutely had to put it in. Also, the word salar apparently means hall like that, which is also apparently where Uppsala comes from. If you ever heard of Uppsala, which I'm guessing if you're listening to this kind of book, you absolutely do know what Uppsala is. So, to that effect and effort, and to the memory of old friends, I bid you all thank you so much for listening, and I will speak to you in the next one.